Alright, so we were discussing about basically the center, the attributes of a circle as well as the methods. So while designing the circle, right, the class is required at the time of requiring or designing the class. We are also required to design the objects based on that, so that we can have a feel and understand that how our the classes will working together. And now for that, we required an object. Object is known as the instance of some class. Suppose the data which we have passed inside the class is being changed. So as it is changed, so at that moment of time, object will take the new value. So as soon as the class has been instantiated, object instance will change and it will take the value dynamically. So a class is a description of what its instances will know and do at that moment of time. Let us suppose with the help of this circle, we are trying to take the position of dimensions as well as radius as well as diameter of a circle. So these things will help me out to understanding. And initially, after initializing or instantiating these few things, we are moving towards another circle. That how that particular zone of circle is being behaving. So at that moment of time, this object will instantly changes and take another new one. So that is why it is known as instance. The class objects are known as instance of some class. Now, circle is having the classes and objects. So in a nutshell, we can call the classes are the blueprints or directions on how to create an object. And objects are instantiations of the class, or in the layman's language, we can say that objects are basically the feel that how your blueprint is going to work in the real world, right? So how can we define a class? So in class, we should have a name as we always have. So, and the list of attributes as well as the methods. Now, when we are having objects, so that we come to know what is the size of object with the help of its radius. We come to know what is the center of that particular circle and what are the color zones are representing. I have already given you the example of COVID-19 that every zone is being divided into three zones, red, orange, or green. So based on those particular orders, we can define that how methodologies can be used further on. Right? So moving ahead from this particular slide, we ought to know that how the basic infrastructure for the circle class will work. Now, the class is being defined by the keyword name class and the name of that particular class. Obviously, as we have already seen in the Java as well as in C++, that we initiate the first name of the class with the L, capital L for the circle. If we're required to do that thing, that is okay. If you do not want, you can take it as simple as it is. Right? So in this particular slide also we have seen here that the class circle defined by the colon is the beginning of class definition. Followed by that, we always in a class are having constructors, right? So in this particular case, I'm just increasing the size of this particular slide so that we all be able to view it in a normal way. So every class, if we are not even defining by default, are having constructors, right? So how these constructors are nothing but again a kind of method which are helpful in initiating the things at the time of declaration itself, right? So by default, in Python, the class is having constructor. So how to define that constructor we can see here by the keyword def, the definition, the method we define initiate the constructor. So when we initiate a constructor, we are having this initiation method or the constructor called, which is being defined initially by two underscore, and after writing the keyword in it again it is defined by the two underscores, right? Within that particular method, we need to define few parameters. Now here is a parameter that is known as self. All right, so let's see here how the class has been working. So whenever we define a class, there is a requirement for the keyword. So the keyword here is the class, and followed by the name of your class, of course, followed by the colon here. And while defining any class, we are required to define a constructor for it. So in Python, there is a way to define this particular constructor. So what is that particular way is def is a keyword followed by underscore underscore. These are two underscore guys. Don't make confusion with this. And an init method has been there in constructor name init, and again followed by two underscore underscore. Also, one of the most important things which you always need to keep in mind while defining a constructor in Python programming, there is always a variable self is being defined here, right? What this particular self is, we discuss it a little bit later. And it is followed by the parameters which are required to use in that particular class, right? So what we want basically from that particular method or the sorry constructor. So the constructor, it requires a center as well as a radius, right? With the help of center we can find the radius also, and if we are having a radius then we can do further other things. So what is the constructor here? The constructor, this is called when someone creates a new circle. These assignment creates attributes, right? So this is what the basic definition of constructor in Python program. Now once we have initiated or designed a constructor, then we are having our own ways of methods. So methods are what that use attributes to draw the circle. So how we are defining the circle over here, let's see. So again we are using def to define a method here. Then draw is the method in which again the self is being decided here. Keep this thing in mind, guys. That self is one of the most important parameter, and it has to be always there whenever we are defining or designing any new constructor or method, right? So if we are not even giving the self, then by default, or we are not passing any parameter here, but so we think that there is no requirement for self here. But keep this thing in mind: if you are not even defining self here, then Python program calls it by default every time, right? So what is self is, we'll discuss it a little bit more later. Then we come towards it how this particular method is being working. So radius is having the self dot radius, x1 is equals to self dot center of radius, that from particular place 0, 1, and again 0. So we are finding out how this particular draw circle is being drawn. Then we need to move that particular circle from one position to another position. So we have already seen this thing also in the coordinate geometry, that how this thing is been working here. So this is the another method which we are calling that with which parameters, with which place we want to shift our circle from. So even for that we require x parameter and y parameter, and with the help of self dot center we are moving that circle to that position. So this is what the basic infrastructure or the blueprint of classes, right? Now from here, moving ahead, what happened here? We are not going on. Mm, just all right. So here we have seen in the previous blueprint, we have seen a few things that how the circle or the classes is working here. Now we are discussing one by one that how the things are being going on. So let's move towards the constructor, right? So the objects constructor, sorry for the spelling mistake here. The object constructor method is named as underscore underscore initiate init underscore underscore. The primary duty of a constructor is to set the state of objects attributes, right? We all know that why these are required. So a constructor may have default parameters or we can pass parameters from our side, right? So calling an objects constructor, that is why the class name is the signal to interpreter to create or instantiate a new object of the data type of that class, right? For my circle, the circle and the parameters which we are having 10, 30, 20, right? So these are the parameters I am passing to trace or to design the new circle for my circle class. But we need to keep one thing in mind. So whenever we are designing the constructor, we always pass the parameter as one known as self. But when we are putting parameters inside that particular constructor, at that time we never pass the self word, the keyword here, right? It is automatic. If you are not putting it here, then by default the server or sorry the compiler or the interpreter will call it, right? So this is how the constructor's basic infrastructure is. Then how we are creating a circle here, we need to define understand the system. My circle is equals to circle in which I'm passing the parameters 10, 30, 20. So this statement creates a new circle object and stores the reference to it in the variable myself. Now the parameters of the constructor are used to initialize some of the instance variables center and radius inside the myself. The words are simple. I'm not required to explain anything here. Once the object has been created, we can always manipulate them by calling on its methods, right? So my circle so dot draw. So what we are required to do, we are required to try it on some channels. My circle dot move. From some initial position, I want to move my circle to given position of x and y. So this is what the work of methods which is being worked, right? So now once we have defined the classes, we are required to make the objects out of it so that we can have feel that how my things have been working here. So my circle is equals to circle passing the parameters. My other circle is equals to circle passing the parameters. So question should be arises from your side. What this my circle is and what this my circle is. So my circle and my circle are the objects or the instances of class circle, right? The circle class defined that the circle knows about the attributes and what it does with all these methods. We want to move that particular circle from one place to another, so parameters has been passed here. We want to create some class definition out of it, so we can even put it, right? Now, similar to a list, the Python defines what a list is and can do by the slicing, indexing, length, etc. But until you create one, you don't really have. So let's create this particular classes and objects and understand the meaning of this one. Right? So what else can we do? We have already seen the how modules can be worked, right? In the laboratory sessions of mine, we have worked purpose. So how we can use this particular circle? Now the uses of that circle, once we have designed that class, once we have instantiated it with the help of objects, we can simply call that module to do some another works, right? How can we do that? We are having a module from circle module import star, right? We can have all the things in that particular import file. My circle is equals to some object is having here, and what we want to do, what we simply want to print the center of our circle. So how can we do that? We can simply print 10, 30 of it. So we can have that instance here and we can get the result that what is the center of my circle is 10, 30 position, right? To understand that what happens here again next, we can see my circle is equals to circle and we are putting some data here. If the information is not been decided or we are simply calling foolishly some information which we have not provided, then we always face error, right? Say for example, in this particular example, I wish to call something known as CARL, but there is no attribute in my main class named CARL. So we cannot call it here. If we call it, then our system will definitely generate an error. In this particular system, my circle.center, this particular parameter is being declared. So that is why while calling it, the system won't show any kind of error, right? But here we never defined something known as CARL card. It can be anything. But since we have not defined it, the system will show some kind of error. Right? Now moving ahead, we are using instance variables. What my instance variables are. So suppose my circle.bob is having some kind of parameter and we are putting some value is equals to 234, right? Now what will happen here? Let's see. Now think if you have Bob is equals to 34 and you can have another parameter John is equals to 234. What will happen? Think what happens if you assign any variable in Python that doesn't exist. What will happen? Let's read the instructions carefully. Python automatically creates a new variable if it does not exist. For instance, Python variable this works the same even if you design. So what is the difference between these? MyCircle.bob is equals to 234. This instance was not there, but at the time of creation, we are putting some value in that. The system will accept it as it is, right? Python will create it, but keep this thing in mind, guys. This is a bad practice, right? Because why this is a bad practice? Because this will create a burden on your compiler, unwanted burden. Both these two parameters will create it, that is mean Bob as well as John. But later on, what will happen? That it may create some kind of problems in your system. So it's So malpractice, whenever you are doing programming, you should do it by basic results. Whatever parameters we have designed in this particular circle class, here, here. So use those parameters, right? We are creating it, system will create, no doubt in that, but it is a malpractice. That's why an example has been given to you, right? So here is the summary. Creating a new instance of variable, just meaning assigning them a value. You can do that. The instance variable is done. We have seen here how can we define inside the class, outside the class. If we are required to use some variable inside the class, self.bob. If you are using outside the class, then we have to design it by a proper suitable name with the instantiation of an object as we already seen always, right? Moving on from here, now attribute instance variable. I'm simply going to read the slide first of all so that we can understand what we are going through and how the things are being going to done here. The very first thing is the attribute represents the characteristics of class. Right? Look at the characters. Say, for example, let's take an example of a phone. Right? Some of you may have Apple phone, some of you may have Samsung phone, some of you may have Nokia phone. But what are the basic attributes of that particular phone are? So for the youth, the color matters. For the old people, the comfortability method. And for the young generation, they want more and more features in that particular phone. Right? So basically the color, the flexibility or the comfortability level, as well as more and more features are the attributes of that particular class known as phone, right? So when we design a phone, or if we simply tell you to imagine about a phone, what will happen? You simply imagine about how that phone will work. It should have some kind of keypad. It should have some kind of color. It should have more and more features like camera. If we talk about camera, there are tremendous features in the camera itself. Now, moving ahead, again, we are having some different characteristics. You can plan even out. Suppose you want some different types of apps on your mobile. If the phone is smartphone, then you can use all of it. Okay? So basically, what even happens here, whenever an object is instantiated, the values are assigned to those particular attributes. So for a you have created for a class these attributes named phone, right? So sorry, so you have created a class named phone, and there are few attributes of that particular class. The very first one is known as color. The second one is known as the comfort level. The third one is known as latest features. We have kept designed the class by keeping all the three generations. Then what happened whenever we are defining it, which particular object is having the best of its feature is the feel of that particular class. See? So this is how the attributes or instances should be defined. Right? The more flexible your attributes are, the best of the best objects you can create out of it. Right? If your phone is having very good and standardized parameter, the better the object of this class. So your blueprint of class is having different attributes and different methodologies of using that particular phone. So which phone comes out best with those features is the class object, right? So for example, Nokia also is having many different features, but do you feel as comfortable as it is on the Apple or the Samsung? That is entirely your choice. So this is how the blueprint, when it comes to the real world, they are having a feel. So this is what this particular sentence wants to speak of here. Attribute represent the characteristics of the class. When an object is instantiated, the values are assigned to the attributes. They are then referred to as an instance variable. The values of instance variable that define the state of individual object. Right? This is what I mean to speak over here. They are referred to as an instance variable because the values assigned to an individual object are unique to that particular class. Some phone may have some features, some phone may not have all the attributes. May be public or private, although due to their specific implementation, they are not truly private in Python, right? In Python programming, there is a specific feature that if the things are not truly private, then how they are being implemented will be after some time. If the attributes are private, they serve to enforce the concept of information hiding, right? Means we are securing the information so that no extra outer object can find out that information and work on it, right? Using methods in the objects. So how we are using methods in the object? Simply by calling it. The methods are created just like a function, but inside the class, right? Inside the class, I have created my function called method and my function too called method, and we are passing the parameter. We all know the self is the by default parameter here, and how the parameter is being passing from here is being C. To use those methods, call them by using the dot notation. So my circle is my object of my class, and my function one is just my function. I'm using it by putting these particular parameters. Suppose it is taking some 5 value, it is taking some 6 value, and I'm performing some operation here. C is equals to P1 plus P2. So what my answer will be, this is equals to 5 and this is equal to 6. So my answer will be 11. Sorry. Right. So, all right. Self again, I'm just skipping it for now. Self is an automatically passed to all methods. You never pass it indirectly. Right? There is no requirement to define any self here while defining this particular using this particular class method. So now moving ahead, let's see what the messages are. The process by which the system components interact, right, are known as messages. Send data to another object, send request to another object, request object to perform some kind of behavior. Implemented as methods, not called functions. Right? Please understand this thing. I sometimes use method by replacing the word function, or by sometimes using the word function by replacing the name method. But please keep this in mind. Inside the class, we always use a method. Okay? So, what is the difference between function and a method? Please try to understand this thing here. Please forgive my this false giving information. Sometimes I call method as a function because basically they work same, but they are entirely different in their processing. How they are different, please try to understand. Functions are the processes that object independent, right? Function do not require any object. In the C programming, we have seen various kind of functions which do not require an object through which they become instantiated, right? Method depends on the state of object. Methods are purely dependent on the state of object. How the object is, the method can be used out of it, right? So this is what the basic difference between that. Sometimes if I use it, please pardon my mistake over there. But in the sense, when I use the method word method, this means I'm specifically, or function, I'm specifically talk about the class at this moment of time, right? Now message passing works. How message passing will work. When calling a method in another class, object orientation uses the term message passing. You're passing message from one class to another. How this thing will work, it doesn't have any different thing as compared to the classes. Now, coming to us, one of the most important thing that I keep on discussing, what is self, what is self, what is self is a reference to current. Whichever current instance we are going through, it is just a reference to it, right? The self word in this in self itself indicating that self means I am indicating to myself. So method is returning something to itself. How this is being done, let's see. The self lets you access all the instance variable for the specific instance you are working with. So see an example here. Circle dot my function. Circle is the name of my class. My function is the name of my method. Right? My circle, then actual parameter one and actual parameter two. Right? So this basically what is doing. This is creating some kind of confusion for class. And how this confusion is being removed, let's find it out in a minute or two. Instead of doing this, we do the previous one. My circle is the name of my object, my function is the name of my method, in which I'm trying to pass the actual parameter 1 and actual parameter 2. Right? Doing this definitely at the time of making a function will work. But what will happen inside the class? Let's try to understand. Self really gets the value of my circle, but it happens automatically. Right? How this thing is being done automatically, let's see. So why do we use it at all, right? In the previous example, what is my meaning to understand? Even if I do not pass the parameter named self here, the system will take it automatically. Right? Now, as a good programmer, I should maintain this practice to pass self always from my function. Right? My circle is what object through which I'm trying to access a method named my function. So in my method, since it says a reference of the current instance is what? The actual parameter 1 and actual parameter 2. To get it quickly or to make it easily understandable by your own system, we always pass self out of it, right? If we do not pass self out of it, this means what will happen? The system has to do a lot of work by itself. Even if you do not pass it, the system will take it automatically, right? So this is what all about self. Now moving ahead from it, why use classes at all? Okay, why we always require classes? We have seen the tremendous or many examples of this. Classes and objects are more like the real world. They minimize semantic gap by modeling the real world more closely. I've given you an example time and again of the phone, right? So when we are designing or thinking of a phone, that how a phone should work, we require a blueprint or mapping of that particular phone. So while designing the phone, we again say what are the attributes of those phones. I have divided those attributes in the terms of three ways. For the young generation, they require color, contrast, what is the size of that phone, which is the latest operating system it is being used by this particular phone. Even young generation doesn't even think about it sometimes. It just needs fast access to all its features. Right? Memory is again a feature with new generation. For the old age people, they are not very much habitual of using the phone or the mobiles. So what they do, they require some kind of comfort level in those particular features, right? So, say for example, someone's family, a grandfather that is not able to access WhatsApp features many times. So this is why the comfort level is being designed. For the middle-aged people, they require more and more features in the class so that they can make all of their systems handy, right? They are required to store some data in that, so they require a recording system in that. They require to click some pictures, so required a more camera in that. Sorry, if they require any other features, so for those particular people, more and more features give the flexibility to the phone. So this is how my attributes are there and how good methods are there so that we can use it, right? So those methods are the flexibility to use those particular attributes at all. So this is what the blueprint of class objects at time and again tell you the other feel that how my real world in a real world that particular phone system will look like. The semantic gap is the difference between the real world and the representation in a computer, right? Do you care how your TV works? Here is an example. How does your TV work? You do not know. You just required a remote to work with on that and how the channel is being initializing and you simply see how these things are being working here. So classes allows you to define some kind of interface to some object and then use them without knowing the internals. So classes are just the background thing and objects are which you basically work and you do not even care that how the basic system is being working together. Right. So the class has been hiding some kind of information. So what are you using one system as a whole? So how this thing can be work? This works with the help of encapsulation. The attributes and the behaviors are enclosed and encapsulated within the logical boundary of object entity. So sometimes the TV is an encapsulation or the remote control is an encapsulation. We need to know the difference between these two particular terminology. Sometimes for we people, we do not even know how the TV background is working. So object is what? The remote control through which we understand, okay, by putting or simply pressing this button, how my system is being working. Right? So this all terminology is known as encapsulation. Abstraction is means hiding all the information. We know this thing time and again. And simply repeating this particular definition, which has been designed here, encapsulation implements the concept of abstraction, how the details associated with the object subcomponents are enclosed within the logical boundary of users of object only see the public interface of the object. All internal details are being hidden. Right? Now, moving ahead, how this particular abstraction has been working. Abstraction has been working by simply putting the behavior or the attributes behind the bar, right? There is a public interface. You can access it only with the help of objects. So this is how an abstraction system works. Abstraction in your life, okay, fine. Here is an beautiful example is being given here. Now, this is what the left hand side through which these three arrows are being going on. What these particular things are defining here or designing. So this is what the switchboard, right? What this switchboard? I don't know which parameter I'm applying here and which of these three is working. With the help of owning or something for the steam or the parboiling, it may work for this. For just making this rack run, I can simply put a switch over here and this device will work and mouse will keep on running. So this is how. Do you know the public interface? Do you know the implementation details? Do we even care how this thing is being working? No, that is why abstractions are required. We do not need to go in depth of everything. That is why the abstraction is being used. Now, implementing the public and private interface. How does this thing works? Let's see here. Can we enforce the use of getters and setters? If I design a class, I would like to make sure no one can access my instance variable directly. They must use my getters and setters, right? Now, let's see how this particular things work. In Java, you will be able to enforce access restrictions on your instance variable. You can make them private. So Java itself enforces data encapsulation. So what happens in case of Python? So does the Python support the private instance variable? Yes or no? We have seen in a previous slide that Python doesn't support fully the private instance, right? So let's see what happens here in Python programming. The Python attributes, the methods and attributes are public by default. Please remember that attributes and methods are public by default. In Java, something else, or in C++, something else was there. Right? Public attributes, any other class or function can see and make changes. Like suppose for object name radius, the parameter attribute name radius is having some value 20. XYZ, some person came into my class and make change in that 20 to 40. That is entirely open to them. Public method, anyone can call my method by using this. Now, what will happen if I wish to make something private so that nobody can access it without my permission, right? So make things private by adding two underscores, right, to the beginning of the name. So self dot underscore underscore radius is equals to 20. Definition underscore underscore method 1. This means it's a private method. It's a private attribute and it's a private method. Now what will happen? Can I access it? If yes, then how? If not, then how? Implementing public and private interfaces, what this particular being designed I'm saying here. Private attributes can only be accessed by methods defined within the class, right? Private methods again can also be called by other methods defined in the class. Idea, everything in the class has access to its private class. Okay, right? So within my class, within my lecture, every student is having full permission to do whatever they want. But nobody from outside the class and can interfere during my lecture to access you people or to access my lecture recordings, right? This is what my lecture recording is a method and you guys are my attribute, right? Now, if we wish to define or hide some information, that how you'll do hiding your private data, then how can you do? We have already seen this thing. This is what this is your constructor. Then if we wish to define something known as private, then I already told you self is the parameter, self-referencing variable, followed by the name which has been initiated with double underscore, and I'm putting some value in that first. Last name is equals to last. Age is equals to age. Now I wish to have another variant method here, but do this method or does this method is private? No, because I didn't put any underscore underscore here. This means this can be accessed outside this particular class also. Right? Now, definition main is been there where I wish to use this particular classes. Though please just keep this thing in mind that Python programming doesn't work on the system of that by default my system starts from the main variable. It has been a main definition, main function. But if we wish, we can always prioritize our things. Then what will happen here? A student is because student is having some kind of data in it, and we are putting some information. So yes, we can access this information. What I'm here doing here, getting a name. Now let's see what will happen. Does it access able to help some information or not? Let's see what kind of error if I'm using it, then it will happen. Trace back most recent call private.py, name of my function main. Attribute error, the object student is not having any attribute name. This means what? Even though I can call this particular name from here, but I cannot access this particular variable from it, right? Is this thing right? Whenever I try to compile this program, I'm not able to access or pass these variables Carl, Johnson, or 18. That is, first name is Carl, last name is Johnson, and age is 18. I cannot pass these parameters from this particular function because my all parameters are private, right? Similarly, what happens with the function? Let's see it one more time, right? Now let's see what will happen here. Again, what I try to do, I try to hide some of my data. Be the super sneaky, then use student underscore name. Then let's see what happens here. You saw, all right. So what we can see that how can you have the access of some personal information? Right? So can we have access to those? If yes, then how? Let's So getters and setters or accessors or mutators are the things through which we can do information. How these things are being done? Let's These methods are the coding conventions. Getters and accessors are the methods that return an attribute. How do these things? We are having a method name get name, and we are having another method that is known as set name. So getters and accessors are the method to return an attribute out of it. Setters and mutators are the methods that set it, right? So why we use getters? Definition we have already seen here to get some information. If I want to store the name instead of as last and first and last name in the class, we will have it with the help of getter, right? Get name, what is the get name? That is first name, known as ABC, and the last name as XY. If I had to use dot notation out of the class, then I can use this particular code outside. So getters help you hide the internal structure of your class. If you don't want some information to be used by someone else, then you can have it. Right? Say for example, what I do, I have first and last. Now I require this first and last name. Right? Then how can we be able to access it? With the help of getters. Getters self.name and getters last.name. And this has the information. So what will happen here with this code? Think about the libraries of code. If the Python authors change how the button class works, if you want to make your own code, encapsulation makes it help. How? We have already seen that. Now another thing is setter. What does this setter does? Setter does, again, if you talk about some parameter known as age. Why? Same reason plus one more. I want to hide the internal structure of my class. I want people to go through my methods to get and set instances. So I want people to make changes. What if I want to start storing the people ages in dogs? So this is absolutely wrong. Of a person's age, you can say is having 70 years divided by 7. That's his initial age in compared to the dog's age is only 10. So the person is of 70 years. No, no. More commonly, what if I wish to do some add validation in that? I require to do it. How can I be able to do that? Na? Right? So this is what the setter method. Getters and setters are useful to provide data encapsulation. They hide the internal structure of a program of your class, and they should be used. Right? Now, how to print the objects? Yes, we have seen everything that how the printers or the objects can be accessed or can be done. This, blah blah blah. But how to print those things has been entirely not being done here. We'll see through an example also this all. Okay? Now a student is having some name card. The last name is Johnson and his age is 18. Now print a student. Um, does it look good? If I simply want to print it like this, it doesn't look so good. Define a special function in your string to convert entire object to a string whenever needed. So how we do? We define it by define underscore underscore string underscore underscore passing the self-referencing parameter. Return the name is self.name. How can we able to access those particular individual data? By providing this kind of information. We simply converted all the information of this into this particular definition, and we are having the name on screen, Carl Johnson, right? Data processing with the class. We do not require it to do data processing. We are required to store some data, then we do yes. Now let's create some class of the student, right? His name is Adam, surname is Henry. Some marks in Python programming in written is 127, and suppose credit hours it is saying the student's name is there. I do not want to make it by myself, so I'm using the defined system here. The hours are of 127 hours and the quality points are 220, right? So this is how the data has been defined. How can we define this all information in our system? So what are required to define here? So we are required to define a class named student, and we initiate it with the help of constructor in which the name is being there, the hours and the quality points are there, right? Hours are there, cannot mention it, but how long it is, so I am defining it of float time. Then quality points, again this is going to be of how a student has performed inside the class. So these are the quality points. So again I am defining it as floating point. So this is how the class is being defined here. Now I am creating a object here with the name a student, and I'm passing few variables. Adams Henry, the first name and the last name. 127 is his hours, the touching hours, and 228 are the quality points. The coolest thing is there we can store all the information of this particular student in one variable. Now, how can we do the processing, right? Processing of some information or some attribute. This processing of information can be done via get name self, return self name. You have put some name out of it. Then hours, we are having one method for this, self hours, how many times he is dedicating to a program, been defined by the hours. Now get Q points, again it has been defined here. So how the quality points has been defined from here. Now this is what the basically known as getters. So we are why we are doing known as getters, because they are accessing some information of ours, right? For example, to print a student's name, you could write print a student dot get name. Simply you can put the student's name, a student dot name, so you will get whatever information you have passed. Now data processing with the class for the GPA. Can you design it? I am having some pseudocode for it and some basic information here. You can help it out, right? Put it classes in the modules is again the documentation and the module declaration. If you want to put some comment here, you can always declare it by putting a hash in front of it, right? So this is what the module documentation is. Why use docstring? Sometimes this question may again arises. So ordinary comments are ignored by the Python programming. Docstrings are accessible in special attribute called underscore doc. Most Python libraries have extensive docstrings. For example, if you can't remember how to use random, so you simply put this docstring. So it will let you know how this particular random variable can work, right? So this is what the documentation of Python programming is. So here is a simple program. You can understand that how the Python programming is being worked here. Now guys, if you wish to understand how a class works here, let's go through it by some example. Mm, no, I don't want to remove this particular class from here.
So now, if I'm having a class named ABC followed by this, now what are my attributes here? And do I need to even require use it? Then I define a method here. Alright, I won't do that because I think I have given enough examples to you today for today's class. Just run it from there, and if we face any problem, then we will see it later. Right? In another class, we will definitely do. So that's all for today's lecture. Let's see how this particular online lectures have been working so far. And from tomorrow, again, we will start with some familiar concepts.